Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hello everyone, I'm Rohit from lifeselfmastering.com, and today we have Bryan Fulchak, who has an inspiring story, who went from being obese and depressed to running marathons, and he has faced nearly losing his wife to illness while the young son had watched. He became vegan in just one day, and he got his master's from top school and rose to a senior executive position in a successful business. He's a best-selling author and contributor to Inc. magazine, and he's transformed his life and developed an approach to help others do the same that he features in his best-selling book, Do a Day. And he's here today to share that philosophy with you. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thank you so much, Rohit. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, so do share your journey. You have a very interesting, journey. You are a successful business executive, and you've written your own book. So, what got you into writing a book, and creating so many awesome achievements?
Oh, thank you. So by way of background, I spent my childhood and into my late teen years obese, and it didn't come from eating too much, although I did that. It was more about dealing with anxiety and depression that started from an early age through my family coming apart through divorce, which is something, so many little kids deal with, or older kids for that matter. And being as young as I was, I really wasn't equipped to face the emotional impact of it. And my parents were far too consumed with the divorce and 3 other kids in the house to focus on my needs. I was only about 4 or 5 years old when things started to happen. So it just left me feeling, like things were falling apart. And as such a little kid, you can't really do anything about that. So it leads to a lot of insecurity and anxiety. And that followed me through really into my 30s. I had lost weight when I was in my late teens, through coming into a different relationship with exercise and wellness that, I had the tools to lose weight, but the underlying reasons, those emotional reasons were still there. So while I lost about 100 pounds the first time around, I ended up gaining back about 40 of them slowly over the next 10 or so, maybe 12 years. And in 2011, I was 32. I had a 2-year-old child. I was married, and my wife, we became aware of the chronic illness that she had that had gone undiagnosed for years. And it started to take her down pretty dramatically. So starting in sort of like May of that year, I think, she started to have flare-ups of these symptoms she'd had over the years that no one could ever figure out. And usually they'd pass after a day or two, but this time it didn't pass. And they kept building and building. And it got to the point where she was down to about 100 pounds. She was bedridden. She was losing 2 pounds a day. And her doctors really, they gave up on her, but I think they never even tried. And there was this moment, June 30th in 2011, where I just sort of, paused and took stock and realized there's a very good chance I'm about to lose my wife, and my son is watching this happen. And I'm not the man I should be for him, for myself, for anyone, certainly not for her. So, it was like, I'm unhappy in my job. It was a very political place, and I'm not that kind of person. So that was wearing on me. I had all these issues from my parents' divorce that I had never dealt with, that I was aware of, but just kept, growing stronger and stronger. My mother was getting divorced for a second time, and that all brought it to the surface. As I said, I had put back on a lot of the weight. And as much as I was miserable, I was pretty miserable to be with as well for, the other 2 people in my family. And the way I put it is, I wasn't living my life. I was an employee of it. I was constantly doing the things that were being thrown at me, and probably pretty resentful of them, and feeling very stressed about, what else is going to go wrong that I'm going to have to step in and do. And, things are falling apart, and there's all this pressure on me. And I looked at my son in that moment on June 30th, and it made me intensely sad for the experience he was having. And that, if he's going to lose his mother, which I will say she is still here today, so that did not happen, which is tremendous. But if he's going to lose his mother, I have to be better for him. Because if he's going to have a chance in life, he at least needs one parent there and that parent has to be fully present and a better example than I've been. So I woke up the next morning with this energy, this sense of purpose that I honestly have never had before in my life. And I decided that I could go two ways with that. I can let that fizzle out and just say, oh, that was nice, and not do anything about it. Or I can grab hold of it as if it was a lifeline and I can do something with it. And that's when everything pivoted for me. So I chose to do something with it. I used that very purposefully. From the moment I woke up that morning, I went to work out, and instead of just sort of standing on the elliptical, blocking the screen with a magazine, and 30 minutes later it's beeping because it's done, and maybe I was slightly sweaty, I chose an interval program, and I pushed myself really hard. I was super sweaty at the end. I was exhausted, but I had this huge smile because I felt different. And I took that energy and I figured out a few key goals for the things that were driving the biggest source of displeasure and angst in my life. And one was my physical situations, the exercise. I was 222 pounds. I should be about 180. So I said, let me get to 185 by the end of the year. So from July 1st to December 31st. That's not as much as I lost the first time, but it was a pretty significant amount of weight. It would take real effort, it would take planning, and it would take action. So it was something I had to be very present and purposeful in. I said, I was unhappy about my job situation. And as much as people say, leave work at work when you walk out the door, that's just not reality, or at least it wasn't for me. The days of BlackBerries, so work followed me around 24/7, and I had a hard time detaching from the games that were being played. I started the process of trying to change that situation, figuring out how to survive while I was still there, but start making the moves to get out of there. So that was, a long slog of figuring out what I want to do and starting networking and, trying to create opportunities. So I decided I was going to start to invest in my next path. And the last one was, I need to stop making excuses and go and start to talk to someone about what I was dealing with from, early age, those issues from the divorce. If I don't face those things and work through them, then they're going to continue to define too much of who I am. And I will continue to really be a slave to this reactionary, anxiety-filled existence. And that is just, it's my son doesn't deserve that kind of father. I don't deserve that kind of life. And if my wife's going to have a shot in this world to get through it, she's not going to get through it with that kind of support or lack of support. So for all those reasons, I had to change. And, that was, as I said, July 1st, 2011. I have not looked back since then. I got to my weight goal ahead of schedule. I got there. The 185 came on my birthday in October, and I got to 180 by the end of the year. And I've pretty much stayed there the entire time since. And a piece of that's because I also used that direction to pursue a vegan diet. And that's made controlling my weight really easy. I just don't have to work at it anymore. I'm in a different job now. That's amazing. But most importantly, I started down this path that, brought me to your show, where I released a book last year. I've been coaching people for almost 7 years now. And so much of my life is focused on helping people change their lives through this path that I figured out through my own struggles. And that's what I call Do a Day. That's what I use in my coaching. That's what I live every day. And that's what I share, with the world through my book.
Got it. So that is really inspiring. But, you have any tips for people, who want to lose weight because you lost 100 pounds and then again, you were able to lose 40 odd pounds?
Yeah, there's so many things. I'm a certified personal trainer just because I was interested in it. So I can talk about the tactics to lose weight. But what I find is most important is most people who are overweight, actually I'd say everyone who's overweight, or just not where they want to be physically, it's not because of their activity choices and their food choices. Those things need to change, but it's just like for me, it's about purpose. So, trying to figure out what do you actually care about in life? And that's the first step that I work on with people in the book. You have to find your first priority in life. And so there's a series of introspective questions that I ask people. And what I try to do with them is get them to push themselves to figure out what really matters. Well, hey, I'm sorry. The background noise is really, really intense. I don't know if you're able to mute.
Sorry, I'll just mute.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry. I asked a series of questions in the book to help people go on that introspective journey and figure out what really matters to them. But, for your listeners, I boil it down to one: is ask yourself, no matter what else happens, what will you always care about? And whatever answer you come up with, it's probably not the real answer. So you need to ask yourself why that matters. And in operations and in lean, there's a saying of doing the 5 whys. So whatever you come up with, ask yourself why, and keep doing that at least 5 times, and you'll get further and further down to what's really driving it at the root. Because whatever your first answer is, so for someone I was coaching around his career, he was talking about why he needed to find a new job when he had lost his last one. And his answer was just, well, I have to pay the bills. And so I said, okay, well, why does that matter? And it sounds like a stupid question to ask why when someone says they have to pay the bills. Of course you do. But I asked it because his wife worked full time. They had more than enough money saved up. He was close to retirement. He had a good severance package, and it would have taken him past his retirement date. So actually, financially, he didn't have to work. So it wasn't about paying the bills, because the bills would have been paid no matter what. So when I asked him why, then he said, well, because I'm the breadwinner in the family. I said, okay, why do you feel like you're the breadwinner and that's your role? Why does that matter to you? And so we did this back and forth, and ultimately where it led us to is he had been extremely successful in his job. He had been there for over 30 years. He was a very senior person. Everyone in the industry knew him. His family looked at him as, this successful man of the world. And that was gone. And that was his identity. So we got into talking about his identity and how other people viewed him, and that was where he took his pride from. And that was because, we asked why again. He wasn't proud of himself. And so we had to dig into where that came from and what drove, him to seek validation from others when he couldn't give it to himself. And so what started as this like financial obligation as his purpose turned into a journey of self-love and self-respect that he had never gone through in life. And he is in a different job now, and he is hugely successful, but most importantly, he's actually really happy, which he realizes he wasn't in his old job for at least a decade, despite, meeting the criteria of being successful in other people's eyes. So it's a really interesting exercise that kind of has nothing to do on the surface with that initial question or that initial goal of I need to lose weight or I need a new job. But when you go through the exercise, those other things fall into place because you have your purpose, you have your direction, you know why you're doing it. And that's really powerful.
Got it. So let's talk about your book. Why did you write a Do or Day?
So I wrote the book because I've absolutely loved the coaching that I've done and helping people change their lives. That's so rewarding to me. And what I realized is if I did that 24/7, I still wouldn't do enough of it. So I needed to find a way to get the message out more broadly. And I have a mentor who I turned to, and we were talking through that, and he said, look at the dominoes of your life. What is the last domino you're trying to get to? And we talked about that and what, the picture of my life would be in that final domino. And he said, now work backwards. What are all the dominoes you need to knock down to get to that one? And so we just sort of reverse engineered step by step. And I came to this point of clarity that I have to find a way to get my message out more broadly, because I know it works. I know it changes lives. I've seen it firsthand with everyone I worked with, and I live it every day. So it was really just clear I need a way to get that out, and a book seemed to be the most, not just the most rational way to do it, but it was a way that was most in sync with my values and my style. And that was really important because I am a very values-driven person. So I realized I didn't want to do an online course, or I didn't want to do a number of other ways I could have gotten there, because it just wasn't a fit for who I am and how I like to deliver my message. And if it was really going to resonate, I needed to be able to be genuine. So the book was a very natural way for me to do it. And it came out really fast. I wrote it in about 3 months. Like the words just poured out for me. It took another year to edit it, but the concepts, the ideas, they came out of me with no hesitation, because it was just pure from my heart. from my mind, and from my experiences. So that was a really strong validation for me that this was the right path.
Got it. And how does a day differ from one day at a time? Is it any different, or is it just the same?
It is different. So one day at a time to me is about just sort of bearing down and weathering the storm. So just like grit your teeth and get through it. One day at a time, just deal with what's hitting you and it'll pass. A lot of people say this too shall pass. That's not do a day. So do a day is not that passive, and it's not about letting things just hit you and get by. It starts with the word do. So it is about taking action. Every day you wake up and you take a specific action or actions tied to the goals that you're trying to achieve. When I talked about losing that 40 pounds, I had to do specific things with purpose to get there. I wasn't just going to weather being overweight. I wasn't just going to, sit back and hope that the weight came off and I just have to get through this. No, I was going to embrace it, take those actions, and enjoy what I was doing because it was with purpose and it was towards that goal. And there's two key things that you don't do with do a day. And they're in relation to other points in time. So the first is, I use the word day specifically, meaning right here, right now. It's not about yesterday. So it's not about whether you failed at something before. If I looked at being obese, so I put on all this weight, well, that's a failure. And I could talk negatively about myself, and that can keep me from ever changing, because then I define myself by my failures or what I've been put through or what I did wrong or I missed out on. So it's very hard to take action today when you're crushed by the weight of all the missteps and the negative experiences of yesterday. Just because I may have gotten to this negative point, it doesn't mean I have to be there right now. So I can choose not to be in the midst of that, regardless of what happened or didn't happen before. And the other thing that you don't do is you don't overly focus on the future. You can know where you're going, but what you can't do is get overwhelmed by the anxiety of all the things that you believe are going to hit you later, because they may not happen, and they're certainly not happening right now. So if you sit here just worrying and filled with anxiety about all the things that may go wrong or what you're going to have to deal with, you miss out on your ability to act right here, right now for what's best for you in this moment. So it doesn't mean don't have a plan. It doesn't mean don't be aware of potentialities, but don't focus on them. Be aware of them and set them aside. Because what I've learned is if you're crushed by the weight of what's yet to come, you end up making really bad decisions right now because you make them from a place of insecurity. And if you act clearly in connection with what you need to do right now, you're much more likely to get the result you seek. And actually those potentialities you were so afraid of end up not happening most of the time because you did something better today that kept them from coming to be, or at least put you in a better position to face them when they arrive. So it's a mindful approach, really. Right here, right now, do what you have to do from your purpose towards your goal, and you will achieve, and it will add up. As I say, I've been doing this almost 7 years now, and I haven't looked back.
Got it. But there are times when you suppose you lose a parent, or you go through a divorce, or you have a job loss. How does that work out in such sort of an extreme stress?
Yeah, so I've been through all those things. Sorry, not losing a parent, but I've faced loss. Loss of close family, loss of friends. I've lost 2 jobs since going through Do a Day. The first one that I needed to leave, and I actually made the wrong choice in the job that I went to because of some complicating factors. I had a job that seemed like the right one to go to, but it involved a move, and we couldn't move at the time. So I took one that didn't involve a move, and to be honest, it was a worse place than the one that I went to. That I was coming from, and those were very difficult times. But I could get crushed by that, and I could throw it all away, or I can allow myself to recognize, yeah, this doesn't feel good. I'm upset about this. This is bothering me, and just sit back and let those emotions sink in, or recognize them, validate them, but then put them in their place and say those are tied to actions that either will be in the past, or they're actions that already are in the past, and I can still move forward. So in facing loss, the death of someone, of course it hurts. Of course it has an impact on you. And you need to work through that and think about why it hurts and come to a place of acceptance. And I'm an advocate of finding, a therapist or a social worker or a friend or a loved one to talk to and work through that and get to a place where you can either accept the loss or be aware of it and celebrate the positives of that person. Now, some of us lose people who tormented us. And, maybe you lost a parent who had been abusive, and that brings a whole other series of pains and things to work through. And that's why you really should talk to someone, but you can move past it. And if you lose a job, or you're in a terrible job situation, or any other kind of struggle, you put weight back on, or you have, you get in a terrible car accident, you can still come through that. It's all about how you relate to it and how you frame each day relative to that. I've had 15 surgeries. And most of them have been since I started this journey. So I keep having these physical setbacks, and I keep having these periods where I can't exercise. And the old me would have been deathly afraid of putting all the weight back on. I don't feel that way about it anymore because I'm very empowered by what I know I'm capable of doing. And even if I have a setback, I'm recovering from knee surgery right now. Yes, my physical fitness level has deteriorated slightly. I'm really not bothered by that because I will get back to the point I want to be at. And it might be different than before the surgery, but it will still be good. And I will still be highly capable, and I will be happy because I don't define myself by whether I'm 2 pounds above my target weight or not. So it's all about perspective. And when you're in tune to your purpose, and if you can live in line with your purpose, these setbacks are just that. They're setbacks that you can grow from. I was talking to someone yesterday who, the way he talked about he was invested in real estate in 2008, and he lost $6 million and had nothing. And he had a family of 4 kids and his wife, and they were going to lose their house. The way he talked about it, you would have thought he was describing winning the lottery. He was talking about opportunity and growth and, this really rewarding path that opened up. You wouldn't realize he talked about living on the edge of bankruptcy and, wondering how he was going to feed his children or buy them clothes, or, any of those things. It's all ultimately a choice. And if we choose to stay connected to our purpose, it's much easier to get through it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of people did go through, the crash of 2008. It was felt worldwide, but, there are a lot of people who do feel stuck in a job. So, what suggestion would you give to people, and what sort of a job they should go out with, or should they, stick out with the same job? What would be your suggestion?
So I would say it's worth looking at the articles I wrote for Inc. because this is a subject I write on a lot. This is also what a lot of my coaching is on, but there's 2 exercises that I've put together that can be really helpful here. The first I call the big goal exercise. And here's the trick. When people come to me about, I'm in the wrong job, or maybe I've just lost this job and I need to find another job, and you got to help me figure out what that is. I go through the self-exploration first, and sometimes they're frustrated because they're like, I just need a job. I don't need to do all that. Well, the thing is, if you don't do all this, you're not going to find the right job because you won't even know what you should be going for and why. So there's 2 exercises I usually run people through. The first I call my big goal exercise, and it's about trying to understand where you're heading in life and what motivates you. And, I link to that from my website. If you go to doadaybook.com/the exercise, you can download it. And it's just a series of questions you can answer, but really do push yourself. And when you give an answer, ask yourself why. And maybe that wasn't the right answer. Use an eraser. It's okay to write something down and erase it, or scribble it out and write something else down. But allow that to start you down the journey. And the other is, it's an exercise that someone gave me. And it's the must have, must not have exercise. So if you go to doadaybook.com/must, you get this 1 page, and you don't even need to download it. You can just hear the instructions and do it. You take a piece of paper, you split it down the middle. On the left-hand side, you write must have. On the right-hand side, you write must not have. And what you're filling out there is 3 to 5 things that you absolutely must have or must not have in your career or in your job, however you want to phrase it. Now, they can't be the opposites of each other. So if on the must-have side, you say must make over $100,000, and on the must-not-have side, you can't say must not make less than $100,000, because that's cheating. They should be mutually exclusive. but you really have to put down things that truly matter. And don't just write 1 or 2 words, write a little sentence fragment so that if someone were to pick it up, they'd understand what you meant. You have to write a whole story, but just capture the essence of the idea so that it makes standalone sense. And then you really need to press yourself on the answers you gave. So using the money example, I got one of these exercises back from someone, and they put together, all their must-haves and must-not-haves, and they had a salary number in there, and it was pretty high. And so it's not that isn't a valid answer, but I wanted to press them on it, because what I said is, let's call it $200,000. It's a really big salary. I said, let's say you got everything else on your list. All the must-haves were hit. All the must-not-haves were missed. But it was $180,000. Would you take the job? And they, without any hesitation, said, oh yeah, of course. So I said, so either 200,000 is not your must-have number, it's not your true baseline, or money's not as important to you as you think it is. And in either case, there's a self-discovery that needs to happen with that. So we worked through it more. And actually where we got to is the number was far lower. They hadn't really taken stock of their finances to understand, what's the bare minimum I need to make? And if everything else about my job is, perfection, maybe I'm more okay making the bare minimum than right now where I'm in a miserable job and I feel I need to be overcompensated to make up for that. So they hadn't gone through that trade-off exercise yet. But what you find coming out of this exercise is you have much more clarity on what you actually should be doing. And it can be things like, I had someone who said, I must never work past 5 p.m. and I don't ever want to have to come in earlier than 8:30, and I never want to work on weekends. And I said to them, so actually you need to work in like a receptionist role or a factory role or retail role where you're an hourly employee who has a set schedule. And they said, well, none of that interests me. That's not the kind of work I want to do. I said, but the stuff you otherwise talk about being interested in may spill over into 5:30 or 6 p.m. Or if you're working on that great project you're really excited about, you may need to do something Saturday night and you may actually enjoy it. But they weren't thinking about it that way because their current job kept stealing their time and they didn't like their current job. So it felt like an intrusion. So they were like, the way I'm going to deal with that is just put up a barrier so that it can't intrude. And I said, well, why not have a job that you don't mind if it spills over? Obviously it's still better if it doesn't and your time is your time, but it's only an issue right now because you genuinely hate your job. And you don't respect your boss because your boss doesn't respect you. So what if you had all these other must-haves and you didn't have the must-not-haves? Then maybe you wouldn't feel the same way about it. So, it's easier to do that exercise with a coach because you have someone to challenge you. But if you don't, maybe seek out someone who you think will be critical and will give you that pushback, or at least push yourself back. It's a hard thing to do for yourself. It's easier to have someone else do it. But that pushback, that evolution of the exercise is really, really valuable.
Got it. So let's quickly do the top 3. What's your favorite business book?
So this is going to be cheating. It's not an actual business book, but I find it unbelievably helpful to every leader that I've ever coached and to myself as well. It's called Open Heart, Clear Mind by Thubten Chodron, who is a Buddhist monk. It's just the most inspiring, clarifying thing I've ever read. And if that's not valuable for business, I don't know what is.
Got it. And if you go back in time when you started your coaching business or publishing books, well, what is the one thing you would have focused on?
So when I put my book out, I didn't have a true marketing plan. I was doing it too much fly by the seat of my pants, and it did fine. It launched really well and it made the bestseller list for Amazon and all the things I was hoping for. But I would have lined up interviews preemptively. I would have done more that I've since learned, and I'm working on my second book, and I'll absolutely do that for the second one. But I would have paused and maybe rethought when to launch it relative to what I needed to do to make the launch as big as it could be. So it was big, but now I know more. And so I would have done differently. If I had a time machine, I'd do that.
Got it. And what's your favorite online tool, for example, Gmail or Slack?
I might be too old for Slack to make sense to me. I always find it hard to figure out where the responses are, but I do work in Slack. That's how ink editors communicate with the writers. The thing that actually I've really come to love the most is something called social jukebox. It's a social media scheduling platform. It's especially for me as an author and a writer, I can put all of my content in there once and it just fills up the schedule and is constantly tweeting it out or putting it on Facebook or LinkedIn or what have you. That's really, really valuable because I have far too busy of a schedule to constantly be putting things into the social media feed. And that is a really crucial thing these days. So Social Jukebox has been invaluable for me. And I waited too long to pull the trigger and sign up for an account with it, but I'm very happy I did.
Got it. And what's the best way people can reach out to you?
Absolutely. I mentioned doadaybook.com. That's probably the easiest way to find me. I'm working on a website for all of my different activities, and that'll be under bryanfalchuk.com, but good luck spelling my name. So if you can remember, my book's Do a Day, and it's a book, doadaybook.com. You can find me on social media that way. You can link to my Inc. articles, my blog. Of course, you can buy the book. You can sign up for coaching or learn more about that. You can hire me as a speaker, whatever. It's all there on doadaybook.com.
All right. Thank you very much for coming onto the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Rohit.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.